Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to prove time is an illusion. We live in a world where our lives are fully scheduled and conformed to the concept of time. Every minute of our life is dedicated to thinking, planning, organizing, and being a productive member of society. We are constantly torn apart between the past and the future, between what we have done and what must be done, and it can be really hard for us to focus on the present moment. And yet all the teachers who once were and who are now with us in all the religions and their religious teachings that have philosophies and doctrines, all the mysticism and esoteric knowledge of the world, and every person who has had a profound experience of truth, speaks of one and the same thing. Time is an illusion. You see, people tend to divide life into past, present, and future, and these concepts are a product of the mind, and in reality, it is all a mere illusion. The past and the future are thought forms. They are pure mental abstractions. We can only recall what happened in the past during the present moment. We remember an event that actually happened in the present moment, and we remember it in the present. The future, when it happens, is the present moment. Therefore, the present moment is the only real thing, the only thing that truly exists. The past and future bring many thoughts, and thoughts destroy feelings. And a person who is too obsessed with thoughts step by step forgets that they have a heart. A person who is too much in their thoughts gradually begins to move towards spaces where feelings do not speak anymore. By not listening to feelings little by little, they will leave. That's why today there are millions and millions, if not billions of people who do not truly know what the heart means. They think the heart is just an ordinary pump. All their concentration is in their heads. And don't get me wrong, the head is just one extreme. It is necessary, it is a good instrument, but it must be used as a servant. It must not be the master. Once the head becomes the master and the heart gets suppressed, you will still live and someday you will die, but you will not know what God is because you have not experienced love. If there are ways to avoid love, freedom, or happiness, then the past and future are the perfect way to do so. It is impossible to love in the past or future because love is only possible in this moment, in the now. Is there a way out of this nightmare of being burdened by the past and future? Is there an escape of eternal pursuit of happiness that is somewhere out there but in reality only exists in our dreams? Is there an experience that qualitatively differs from what we experience daily? Time and mind are inseparable. When you remove time from the mind, it stops unless you choose to use it. Identifying with the mind means being caught in the trap of time. It is the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memories of the past and anticipations of the future. This leads to an endless preoccupation with the past and future, and unwillingness to respect and acknowledge the present moment and allow it to fully exist. This compulsion arises because the past gives you an identity, and the future holds the promise of salvation and fulfillment in any form. And yet, both of them are illusions. They are distractions. Action always happens in the present because it is an expression of the body which can only exist in the here and now. And yet the mind is like a phantom that lives only in the past or future. Its only power over you is to draw your attention out of the present. Time is not precious at all because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but one point that is outside of time, and that is the present moment. That is truly precious. The more you focus on time, on the past and the future, the more you miss out on the present moment, the most precious thing there is. And why is it the most precious? First of all, because the present moment is the only thing that exists. There is nothing else. The eternal present is the space in which your entire life unfolds. It is the only factor that remains constant. Life is now. There has never been a period when your life was not now, nor will there ever be. And second, the present moment is the only point that can take you beyond the limits of the mind. It is the only point of access to the timeless and formless realm of being. Now I ask you, have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside of the present moment? Do you think you ever will? Is it possible for something to happen or exist outside of the present moment? The answer is obvious, isn't it? Nothing ever happened in the past. It only happened in the present moment. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will only happen in the present moment. Life is always now. Whatever happens, whatever you experience, feel, think, or do, it's always now. That's all there is. What you think of the past is actually a memory of the previous present moment stored in your mind. If you remember the past, you reawaken the memory, and you do it in the now. The future is an imagined present moment. It's a pure projection of the mind. When the future comes, it comes as the present moment. When you think about the future, you do it in the now. The past and future obviously do not have their own reality, the same way the water does not have its own source of light, but can only reflect the light of the sun, the same way the past and the future are only pale reflections of the light, power, and reality of eternal presence. They borrow their reality from the present moment. The essence of what I am saying cannot be fully understood by the mind. And once you understand it, there is a shift in consciousness from mind to being, from time to presence. Suddenly, everything appears alive. It radiates energy, and the beauty of being shines through all things. In emergencies where your life is endangered, and a shift in consciousness from time to presence can sometimes occur naturally. The personality that possesses the past and future momentarily recedes, and it becomes replaced by a strong conscious presence. It becomes very calm, yet very awake. The required response at that moment then arises from that state of consciousness. That's the reason why some people enjoy engaging in dangerous activities such as mountain climbing, car racing, and so on. And although they may not be aware of it, these activities force them to be in the present moment. And now they are in that intensely awake state, free from time, problems, thoughts, and the burden of personality and linear ego. In such situations, even a momentary departure from the present moment can cause death. Unfortunately, these people gradually become addicted to such activities in order to experience such a state. But you don't have to climb the north face of Mount Everest or skydive through the clouds. You can step into that state at this moment. Since ancient times, spiritual masters of all traditions have pointed to the present moment as the key to unlocking the door to the spiritual dimension. Nevertheless, it seems that this teaching has remained shrouded in secrecy. Certainly, they do not speak of it in churches and temples. If you go to church, you may hear verses from the Gospels, such as, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Or, "Anyone who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God." Or you might hear a passage about the beautiful flowers that do not worry about tomorrow, but live in the timeless present because God cares for them. Even though they are allegoric, the depth and radical nature of these teachings are not fully recognized or encouraged. It seems that no one realizes that such teachings should be lived, and as such, they invoke profound inner transformation. The whole essence of Zen lies in walking on the edge of the present moment, being so utterly and completely present that no problem, no suffering, nothing that is not you in your essence can exist within you. In the present moment, in the absence of time, all of your problems are resolved. Suffering requires time, and it cannot survive in the present. To divert attention from time, the great Zen master Rinzai would often raise his finger and slowly ask, "What is lacking in this moment?" It is a really powerful question that does not require an answer at the level of the mind. It is designed to draw your attention deeper into the present moment. A similar question in the Zen tradition is, when, if not now? The present moment is also paramount in the teaching of Sufism, which is the mystical branch of Islam. Sufis have a saying, "The Sufi is the child of the present time," and Rumi, the great poet and teacher of Sufism, declared, "The past and the future hide God from our eyes, and both are consumed by fire." Meister Eckhart, a spiritual teacher from the 13th century, beautifully summed it up. Time is what prevents light from reaching us. There is no greater obstacle to being closer to God than time. With the timeless dimension comes a different kind of knowing, one that does not kill the spirit that lives in every creature and everything. It is true knowledge that does not destroy the sanctity and mystery of life, but contains deep love and respect for all that is. It is knowledge about which the mind knows nothing. The mind cannot know the tree. It can only know facts or information about the tree. My mind cannot fully know you. It can know only labels, judgments, facts, and opinions about you. Only the being knows directly. The mind with all its knowledge has its place in the practical realm of everyday life. However, the mind takes over all aspects of your life, including relationships with other human beings and nature, and becomes a monstrous intruder that, if not mastered, could destroy all life on the planet and ultimately kill the host itself. I have given you an insight into how timelessness can transform your perceptions. But one single insight, no matter how beautiful or deep, is not enough. A lasting shift in consciousness is needed, and that is precisely what we are talking about. Therefore, break the old patterns of denial and resistance to the present moment. Practice withdrawing attention from the past and future whenever it is not absolutely necessary. Step out of the dimension of time every day, as often as possible. If it is difficult for you to step directly into the present moment, a good place to start is by observing the mind's habitual tendency to avoid that moment. You will notice how the future most often imagines itself being better or worse than the present. If the imagined future is better, it gives you hope or pleasant anticipation. If it is worse, it creates anxiety. And both are just illusions. By self-observation, more presence enters your life automatically. The moment when you realize that you are not fully present is the moment you become present. Whenever you are able to observe the mind, you are no longer caught in its trap. A new factor has entered, something that does not belong to the mind, the presence of the witness. And you are the witness. Be present as the observer of the mind. Become the observer of thoughts and emotions, as well as reactions in different situations. Observe your own reactions in the situations you find yourself in, instead of the person that prompted the reaction. On top of that, notice how often your attention shifts to the past or the future. Do not judge or analyze what you have noticed. It is unnecessary. Instead, observe the thought, feel the emotion, and then observe the reaction. Do not make personal problems out of them. Then you will experience something more powerful than any of those things you are observing. A quiet presence that observes itself in the background of the content of your thoughts. That silent witness, which is the true you. I know a strong presence is needed when some situations trigger a reaction which is accompanied by a strong emotional charge. For example, a situation in which your self-image is threatened, or when a challenge arises in your life that evokes fear, or when things go downhill, or when an emotional pattern emerges from the past. In such moments, you are prone to becoming unconscious or dissociated. You are overwhelmed by the reaction or emotion, and you become that reaction or emotion, and you start to express them. All of a sudden, you start to justify, act wrongly, attack, defend, and so on. But that is not you. Those are patterns of reaction that is the mind in its usual survival pattern. Identifying with the mind gives it more energy, yet observing the mind takes away its energy. Identifying with the mind creates more time, and yet observing the mind opens up the dimension of timelessness. The energy you take away from the mind turns into presence. And once you succeed in feeling what it means to be present, it becomes much easier to simply choose to exit the dimension of time whenever time is not needed for practical purposes. Then you become able to deeply surrender to the present moment. This does not impair your ability to use time, past or future, when you need it to use it for practical purposes. Nor does it weaken your ability to use the mind. In fact, it enhances it. When you use your mind, it will be sharper, disciplined, and more focused. This moment, the present moment, is the only thing you can never escape from, the only constant factor in your life. And yet it is not a prison, it is freedom. Whatever happens, and however your life changes, one thing is always certain. It is always the present moment. And since you cannot escape from the present moment, why not warmly welcome it? Why not befriend it? Being present, being here and now gives us access to universal truth. It gives us higher aspects of our being and our intuition. We cannot know the truth if we are not here and in the now, because the truth is only accessible in the present moment. We cannot be truly free unless we are rooted in the now, because being free implies freedom from what was and what will be. We cannot be truly happy and fulfilled unless we are now, because now is the only place where true happiness exists. Your most hidden sense of I am is in no way connected to what happens in your life, nor is it in any way connected to content and time. The sense of I am is united with the present moment. It always remains the same, whether it is in childhood or in old age, in health or illness, in success or failure. I am is the space of the present moment, and at its deepest level will always remain unchanged. It is often mistakenly considered as content, and therefore I am or the present moment is only perceived faintly and indirectly through the content of your life. In other words, the present moment is obscured by time, and so you forget that you are rooted in existence. You forget your divine reality, and you get lost in the hustle and bustle of the world and its drama. And when human beings forget who they are is when confusion, anger, depression, violence, and conflict arise. But how easy it is to remember the truth and thus return home. I am not reduced to my thoughts or my emotions or sensory perceptions and experiences. I cannot be reduced to the content of my life. I am life. I am the space in which everything happens. I am consciousness. I am the present moment. I am. What I have been seeking for lifetimes has been present in me all the time, in the point of here and now. You are the one who moves, not time. Stop moving from past to future, and time will disappear. I want to thank everyone for dedicating your time and your patience to watch this video until the very end. I know we live in fast times where we are overloaded and overstimulated with information, causing us to lose our focus and attention span. That's why I decided to create this video to help remind everyone what truly matters in life, and that is the beauty of the present moment. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with your friends and family so we can spread awareness and remind ourselves of who we really are, and that is divine beings. Have a great now.